going to pass the presentation to Shilpa, and she will provide more details about how to bring international teachers here in the United States and add them to your faculty.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm in Florida, so it's good afternoon for me. It's a pleasure being here today, and I appreciate this opportunity to share some valuable insights on J1s and H-1Bs, as well as compliance matters that can affect schools when they consider hiring international teachers. Now, Anthony's done a phenomenal job explaining what are the benefits of hiring international teachers. That said, you also have to keep in mind that there are obviously legal requirements to bring these teachers on board. For one thing, I've noticed that teachers in general are a very special group of people. Having children, I couldn't appreciate you all anymore. And the opportunity and the experience that international teachers bring, plus the experience that they bring to our schools in the United States, is second to none. So in order to assist you with the process, the US government has obviously made available a couple of visa categories. The J1 and the H1B are the main ones that teachers pursue. The J1 is essentially sponsored by a US Department of State designated sponsoring organization, which is called the sponsoring J1 entity. And there's a host entity, which is the school, and the beneficiary, which is the applicant. So all the paperwork is completed between the J1 sponsoring agency and the beneficiary to ensure that they're vetted accurately, to ensure that they meet the minimum qualifications to qualify as teachers in the respective subject area or fields for which they need to be hired by a school. And then the schools are provided with these candidates who then interview them. And if they're satisfied, then they're placed on J1 visas. Now, as Anthony correctly pointed out, J1 comes with its limitations to the extent that it's valid for up to 3 to 5 years at the most. It is dependent on a program sponsor. There's some very strict requirements to it. And also, one of the most important things to remember is a lot of J1 teachers who come from a majority of the countries are subject to what's called the 2-year home residency requirement, which requires them to return to their home country at the end of their J1 period and complete at least a 2-year period in their home country before they can come back again to the US. So that essentially is a restriction or a condition that's imposed on a lot of J1 holders. So clearly it's not long-term. And based on that 2-year home residency requirement, they cannot even convert to an H-1B or get a green card unless they obtain a J1 waiver through the US Department of State, or they go back to their home country for 2 years. So that was a quick sort of explanation on how J1s work. Now, H-1Bs are a very attractive visa category because they're professional visas. Now, schools that are not for profit or and are connected to a public or private nonprofit university, they have an affiliation, they enjoy what's called the H-1B cap exemption, which means they do not have to go through a lottery, which other private schools which do not have this advantage would have to. And a lottery restricts the number of candidates an individual can come on, essentially come into the United States because you have to get selected to the lottery. On the other hand, when you do cap exemption, it's open throughout the year. You can meet the August date that most schools essentially have as a start date, August, September. Sometimes they want you to come in a little bit earlier for training. The beauty of the H-1B is it can be approved for up to 6 years in 3-year increments. And if the school really likes a candidate, they can think about pursuing permanent residency for them without any restriction, which of course leads to a very long-term relationship without having the turnover that most schools unfortunately face. And it also gives the teacher a level of stability, which is so important for them to stay in a school district or within a school to be able to, stay committed, to basically be like, okay, I'm giving my best to the school and the school is helping me build a future in the United States by supporting my immigration processes. Now, as I mentioned, H-1Bs for up to 6 years issued in 3-year increments. The school is a direct sponsor, which means the petition is filed by the school or through one of its designated agents, and it's also long-term. So H-1B is a win-win scenario in hiring processes. Now, what are the requirements of an H-1B? First and foremost, the school has to vet the candidate and ensure they're satisfied with their credentials. Then the school issues a formal offer letter to the individual, and the process is then initiated. It could be, and you have to ensure that the teacher has, at least at the very minimum, the US equivalent of a bachelor's degree in a field related to the coursework that they'll be teaching. If it's elementary school, then you're looking at education. If you're looking at a math teacher or science teacher, the school has to ensure that they have a degree in math or science, and the minimum requirement is a bachelor's degree. One of the other things that the school have to keep in mind is that the teacher needs to obtain a state license to be able to teach in that school district, depending on what the state requirements are. Now, you can get an emergency certification, you could get a 1-year certification, you could get a 3-year certification. This all depends on the state requirements. Once we are satisfied that all the initial requirements are met, we go ahead and submit what's called a labor condition application to the US Department of Labor. Those are basically the wages the school agrees to pay to the teacher during the validity of the H-1B period that they are in the United States and working for the school. So the wages come back at, let's say, for example, $45,000 a year. It's just an example. Then the school will have to commit to paying $45,000 a year to that teacher based on the labor condition application. The labor condition application takes about 1 week to be certified by the Department of Labor, after which the I-129 package, which contains the I-129 forms, along with the H-1B supplement, the certified labor condition application, a support letter explaining what the school requirements are, how the teacher qualifies, and how the H-1B requirements are met, all the documentation pertaining to the school's affiliation with any institute of higher education and how they qualify for cap exemption, and the beneficiaries' documents are submitted to USCIS. USCIS is very happy to approve a petition that's fully documented. Once it's approved, the teacher is good to go. If they're overseas, they'll apply for a H-1B visa at their US embassy accounts that receive it, enter the US, and start working for the school as of the start date. If they're within the US, we could pursue possibly a change of status, whereby as of the day the change of status becomes effective, their status changes from whatever status they hold in the country and become an H-1B holder, and then start working on H-1B status for the school. Now, this is obviously a step-by-step process. Now, Anthony, if you could kind of look at the compliance requirements, but I'm happy to also cover the cap exemption a little bit more in detail. What is cap exempt? Essentially, cap exemption means the school has to qualify for not having to put the candidate through the lottery, because all for-profit employers are required to go through what's called an H-1B lottery in order to be able to file an H-1B petition for them. And that lottery is conducted in March of every year. It's a very popular category. So USCIS always receives more applications for the lottery than they actually have visas. So there's a random computer-generated process through which people are picked, and only those H-1B applications can then be submitted. And once they're submitted and approved, the person can start working as of October 1 of that particular year. On the other hand, the beauty of cap exemption that we were discussing earlier is given as a benefit to schools that are not-for-profit, or even for-profit schools that essentially are affiliated with public or private nonprofit institutes of higher education. So if you have, let's say, an affiliation agreement to work together with your local community college or university, that can be used to your advantage in order to apply for an H-1B cap exemption. So as the slide shows, you have what exemption status basic requirements are. Please file correctly, nonprofit affiliated organization. We have to provide documentation of affiliation with the qualifying institution, and of course, work with an immigration team or an immigration law firm that clearly understands what the requirements are and is able to submit a comprehensive package on behalf of the school and the teacher to ensure that an approval is seamless. We could go on to the next slide, Anthony. Now, school responsibilities, when it comes to an H-1B, are fairly straightforward and are strict at the same time. The school district is the direct employer in all filings. So you basically control the employment of the beneficiary. You dictate what classes they're teaching, what are their work hours, which grades are they teaching, what subjects based on, of course, their background are they going to be teaching at school. You have to comply with the wage that I previously mentioned. Let's say it comes back at $45K a year. You're required to pay a minimum of $45,000 to that teacher for the duration they're employed with you. And then you have to maintain proper records, which we will, if we were to represent the school district or through Global Ed, then of course we will ensure that you have the public access file and you have all the documentation that you need to keep for record keeping purposes in case there's a visitation by a USCIS officer being like, okay, we understand that you hire international teachers. Do you do proper record keeping? And then you just present the file to them and they're happy, you're happy, and everybody goes on about their day. Other than that, I would like to point out that H-1B still remains one of the best options that schools can pursue because A, it is, if done correctly, it's fairly straightforward. B, in terms of costs, it essentially is, of course, something that the school has to bear, only because the Department of Labor regulations mandate that all expenses related to an H-1B filing, with the exception of premium processing, have to be paid by the school, which means any filing fees, and if you work with an immigration team, their fees have to be covered by the school. I'll let Anthony cover the fee structure, but it's very standard. As far as these filings are concerned, it's more or less a fixed fee basis in most scenarios. The government filing fees have to be paid at the time of filing. The petitions can be filed under premium processing by paying an extra fee of $2,805 to the US government. And after that, once the petition's approved, based on wherever the individual is, they would be able to start working for you once they have the visa in hand. Again, these are legal compliance tips that you can please pay attention to. Please note H-1B teachers are employees. They're not independent contractors, so they are considered W-2 employees, not 1099 contractors. Pay teachers the prevailing wage as set by the Department of Labor. Make sure that if you change their work location, let's say you have multiple schools within your district which qualify. If you choose to move them from one school to another, an H-1B amendment needs to be filed with USCIS before the teacher can be moved. Once the amendment is filed, the teacher can be moved even if the approval is still pending. And again, the public access file for each H-1B hire should be kept for record-keeping purposes. It's not only beneficial for you to keep your record straight, but also in the case of any sort of site visit by a USCIS officer, it's very helpful to have this paperwork in order. At this point in time, I think I've covered all the important aspects of J-1 and H-1B. Anthony, I'll let you take the baton.